Trackhouse and Spire Motorsports are making some huge moves. Ford loses out on a top prospect. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. Monday, beginning of another beautiful week. And boy, we have a lot to discuss. A charter changing hands, two teams forming an alliance, and that's just the beginning. We will cover everything in just a few moments. I'll give you my take. But first, the 2024 NASCAR schedule is beginning to take shape. The full schedule could be released any week, any day now, but yesterday, NASCAR and Fox confirmed that the Clash at the Coliseum will return for its third consecutive season. One interesting twist to next year's event, however, will be that the NASCAR Mexico Series will join the Cup Cars in Los Angeles. They will be the companion event. They will run their own race ahead of the Clash at the Coliseum main event. That's really cool news. I think it's genius, actually, to bring the NASCAR Mexico Series to Southern California. I don't know hardly anything about that series, but that's the point of doing this. It's also a great way for NASCAR to highlight their existing international foothold. I'm glad the Clash at the Coliseum is back. I believe the original deal was for 3 years. This would be year 3. Part of me is just relieved that this likely means we won't have a Coliseum points date, but no, I'm glad the Clash is back. Year 1, they drew in 4.3 million viewers on TV. Last year was lower, but still, I think it was close to 3.7 million. Both numbers completely shattering the previous couple years at Daytona. The Clash is supposed to be an exhibition event. This is where you try new things, push boundaries. Racing inside of a football stadium just a few miles from downtown Los Angeles is still, in my opinion, a very novel concept. I'm excited to see year 3. After next year, I think we can reassess and see if in 2025 and going forward, whether the Clash could be moved to a different venue. But that wasn't the only NASCAR schedule news yesterday. I saw Adam Stern from Sports Business Journal tweeted this, but it was an article actually from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel in Wisconsin. They reported that season ticket holders were told that Road America won't host any NASCAR events next year for the first time since 2009. Oh, a gut punch, I'm sure, to many, especially Midwestern fans who read that headline. Now, within the article, there is some room for optimism. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel writes that this decision may be more of a short-term break rather than breakup. And then they go on to talk about how the 2024 Olympics are affecting NASCAR and NBC's summer schedule. It's tough to be an independent track like Road America amidst the sea of SMI-owned tracks, ISC, now NASCAR-owned tracks. But I truly hope that next year is just a one-off. 1 year without Road America, and then come 2025, hopefully at least the Xfinity Series or the Trucks or both can make their return to Wisconsin. I guess the Truck Series did go back to the Milwaukee Mile this summer, so that's something, but the racing culture history in Wisconsin is too great for NASCAR to ignore. I hope Road America is back by 2025, and their absence from the 2024 schedule is solely due to difficult scheduling decisions made by NBC in wake of the Olympics. Real quick, before we talk about the Spire and Trackhouse news, Saturday night, late Saturday night, I posted my weekly race recap and analysis video, and I got many comments from you guys, so let's take one of those comments from Out of the Crowd. I said in that video that Denny Hamlin was the fastest car in the round of 16. He was the only driver with the winning car all 3 races. Now, a lot of y'all raised your hands and said, wait, what about Kyle Larson? He finished first, fourth, and second. Cavante Caldwell left just one of those many comments saying maybe Hamlin is the favorite, but Larson is right there with him, the only driver with 3 straight top 5s. That's a fair point, and I probably shouldn't have glossed over Kyle Larson quite as quickly as I did Saturday night, but my original point I still stand by fully. At Darlington, Denny Hamlin led the most laps, was in position to win that race when a loose wheel derailed his efforts and handed Kyle Larson control of the race. At Kansas, Denny Hamlin was cruising to the win, had a huge lead when, caution, overtime. Then Denny Hamlin mistimed the restart and finished second. Bristol, Denny Hamlin won by several seconds. He was the best car at the end of that race, clearly. Denny Hamlin led triple the number of laps Kyle Larson led in the round of 16. Larson had better finishes overall, but my point the other night and my point today is that Denny Hamlin had the winning car in all 3 races. If that speed continues, Hamlin's a lock for Phoenix. That's why I called him the favorite. But Kyle Larson will probably be there too. I'm just more sure of the 11's speed right now than anyone else. Larson's a close second, but Denny Hamlin was the fastest car in all 3 races, in my opinion. Also looking at the stats, that was my point the other night. But I appreciate you all leaving the comments, and I probably shouldn't have glossed over Kyle Larson quite like I did. All summer long, really all year long, really the past couple of years, the NASCAR Cup Series charter market has been stagnant. We heard from Brad Keselowski at RFK earlier this summer that nobody is selling their charters. Your money is no good here, he's been told. Much of what we thought we knew about this NASCAR free agency cycle was called into question Saturday afternoon when Trackhouse and Spire made a major announcement. Trackhouse has signed driver Zane Smith to a multi-year contract, but will lease him out to Spire Motorsports in 2024 as Spire has now acquired a 3rd charter, this one coming from Live Fast. I'm like the old caveman SpongeBob meme. What is going on? I've had the whole weekend to digest this, and still it feels like information overload. Let's start with the charter real quick. So The Athletic reported this first, but Spire Motorsports is buying Live Fast, the 78 team's charter, for roughly around $40 million. That shatters the previous reported charter sale, which went for, I think, $13.5 million a couple years ago when 2311 bought a charter from Starcom. Charter values have skyrocketed in recent years as many of the teams anticipate getting a friendlier revenue agreement, TV agreement beginning in 2025. Now, that has not been signed. They're still negotiating that, but teams seem fairly encouraged with the direction things are going. In case you still wondered why the teams want the charter system to become permanent, look no further than BJ McLeod, Matt Tiff, Joe Falk, and everyone at Live Fast Motorsports. My gosh. I still get tons of comments from people criticizing the charter system, and it's not without its flaws, but ever since it was implemented in 2016, this was the goal. Previously, if a team went out of business, all they had to sell were old parts, maybe a building if they were lucky. But now with the charter agreement, teams have an asset that so far has dramatically increased in value that they can sell. It's like security. Justin Marks, Denny Hamlin, Michael Jordan, Brad Keselowski, and others have all invested into the sport in recent years because of the security the charter system provides. I'm happy for Live Fast, BJ, Matt, everyone over there. I'm hoping a portion of that $40 million will go towards BJ McLeod Motorsports, Xfinity Series team that's shown flashes this year. Imagine what a little extra cash could do for that team. Live Fast did put out a statement saying they will continue to race at least part-time in the Cup Series, so there's that. The more I think about it, the more it makes sense to me that Live Fast would want to sell that charter. The 78 car just has not been competitive. Last year, they finished dead last in the owner standings. This year, I think they're on pace to finish last once again. If they were to finish 34th or worse in the owner standings again next year, they would be in a precarious situation where NASCAR, I believe, would have the right to repossess their charter for free. No $40 million. It would have been zero. NASCAR would have just taken it back and sold it to whoever they wanted. Which, side note, looking at the owner's points, and maybe I'm misreading this, but both Rick Ware cars, the 15 and 51 this year, seem to be in precarious points situations. So that might be something to keep an eye on. Not sure exactly what the fallout will be. But yes, Spire Motorsports, who currently has 2 charters, one for the 7 and one for the 77, has purchased Live Fast charter. So Spire is now a 3-charter team. In the past, we've seen teams lease charters out to other Cup Series organizations. In fact, that's how Trackhouse got started. Interestingly enough, Trackhouse in 2021, I believe, leased a charter from Spire at the time for Daniel Suarez in the 99. Then in 2022, of course, they bought those 2 charters from Chip Ganassi. They no longer needed the Spire charter, but these 2 teams have worked together in the past. This isn't the same kind of deal, though. Trackhouse is not leasing Spire's new charter. Instead, they're leasing out their new driver. I know this is complicated. Bear with me. Zane Smith. Let's talk about him for a moment. Zane Smith is signing a deal with Trackhouse, but for at least next year, Trackhouse is loaning him out to a different team, in this case, Spire. Spire announced they're forming a deeper technical alliance with Trackhouse going into next year. It's like a love triangle in a weird way. We've seen drivers be farmed out to other teams before. I think I mentioned this last week. Eric Jones, his rookie year, he was signed with Joe Gibbs Racing, but they leased him out to Furniture Row for a season. Then they brought him in-house when the 20 car became available. I think that's what Trackhouse is hoping to do here as well. Justin Marks made it clear the goal is for Trackhouse to open a third full-time car in time for 2025. Now, he was asked why Trackhouse didn't just go out and buy this charter themselves. Why did Spire buy it? And Justin Marks said that just quite frankly, they aren't ready at this point to open a third team. It's going to take time. They want to be very methodical about how they do it.
Expanding to a third team, it takes time and it takes a lot of money. And, we have to be strategic about how we capitalize that third team. It sounds stupid, but Featherlight trailers are 8 months out and there's none in the used market. Like, we have to take our time doing this stuff. And so where it makes sense for us is putting Zane in an established team where he can focus on the driving. We can focus on, doing everything we can to support him over there and support that car over there, while we, expand over the course of a year. It just wouldn't, we can't rush it, and we didn't want to throw it together late. It just has to be a process that's going to take course over some time.
Trackhouse is making huge moves. They signed Shane Van Gisbergen earlier in the week to a wide-ranging, widespread development deal. He'll make some cup starts, presumably in the 91, but he'll also make a ton of Xfinity, truck, and late model starts. Now they have Zane Smith as well, and I said I was going to talk about Zane Smith. Let's actually talk about Zane Smith now. I've been high on Zane Smith for quite some time. I believe he is one of the top, most talented young prospects in the lower NASCAR ranks. He got very emotional on Saturday during the press conference. This was a big moment for him.
Been a crazy road to, damn it.
Oh. This is why we love it, because it means something to him, right? This is great.
Give me a minute. I held it together during the championship speech, but damn, I thought I was all good today. Just means the world to me. I almost didn't have anything a couple of years ago, and this is like the place I want to be.
How did we get to this point? Zane Smith has been a Ford driver the past couple of years. He won a Truck Series championship driving a Ford last season. But earlier this summer, Front Row Motorsports made their decision. They chose Todd Gilliland and Michael McDowell to be their two drivers going forward. At that point, there really was no room for Zane Smith unless he wanted to stay in trucks for another season, and he'd been very clear that was not his plan. At that point, he was free to talk to anyone and everyone, and no surprise, many teams came knocking. I know Zane Smith hasn't spent much time in the Xfinity series, but in trucks, he's made the championship for all 3 seasons he's been full-time. He's once again in contention for a championship this year. He won the championship last season. He has 9 total Truck Series wins. In his few Cup starts, he's looked pretty good. Last year, remember, he subbed for Chris Buescher at Gateway and finished 17th in his Cup Series debut. This year, making a one-off start for Front Row, he finished 10th in the Coca-Cola 600. What I like about Zane Smith is that he's 24 years old, so he's still very young, but he's not raw. He's got some wins. He's got a championship trophy on his shelf. He's actually older than other Cup drivers like Harrison Burton and Todd Gilliland. There's a lot to like about Zane Smith, and I'm telling you, other teams were interested, including Ford teams. Brad Keselowski tweeted this today, 100% Zane will go win a lot of races and championships. Justin Marks knows what he's doing. Wasn't meant to be for us. And I know Brad Keselowski obviously is the owner of RFK. RFK's fine. Keselowski's going to race for at least a few more years. He's in the playoffs. He's in the round of 12. Chris Buescher's in the round of 12. He's younger. He'll be great for another 10 years, potentially. RFK's not the problem. Even Penske, who's having kind of a down year, I don't think Penske is the problem, although that 2 car, I do have questions. Stewart-Haas is a problem right now. Just a few years ago, all 4 SHR cars were in the round of 8. Now there are 0 SHR cars even in the round of 12. And Kevin Harvick, the lone bright spot for that team this year, is retiring. Eric Almirola, a veteran presence who brought sponsorship, is likely retiring. And Ford's pipeline now, without Zane Smith, is dry. They've got Cole Custer. They've got Riley Herbst. They've They've got Haley Deegan. You think I'm joking, but Haley Deegan is suddenly like a top 3 or top 5 prospect in the Ford system. No disrespect to Haley Deegan, but that's not a great place for Ford to be at the moment. So to lose Zane Smith, and I get that I don't think he had a ton of funding or sponsorship to his name, but he did have a lot of talent. And that's something that Stewart-Haas Racing, Ford, needs more of right now. Zane Smith is leaving Ford for Chevrolet. To me, this move, Zane Smith to Trackhouse/Spire, is kind of the opposite of the move we talked about last week, Daniel Hemrick going to the Cup Series with Kaulig. Hemrick is a decent talent, but to me, that move was more about fit. Hemrick fits the work ethic, the culture that Kaulig has created. He's a safe, comfortable, reliable pick. Zane Smith to Trackhouse, will be farmed out to Spire next year, is kind of an odd fit. You know, Zane Smith is a West Coast California kid joining Trackhouse, which has Ross Chastain, blue-collar watermelon farmer from the East Coast. Next year, at least, Zane will be teammates with Corey LaJoie, who's a gritty, no-nonsense North Carolina guy. I'm not sure all these personalities are going to mesh right away. I mean, you got Daniel Suarez from Mexico. But one person I trust in all this is Justin Marks. I trust Justin Marks to tie this whole knot together. He's done a pretty great job of it in his young ownership career thus far. A Spire team next year of LaJoie, potentially Carson Hocevar, and Zane Smith is full of potential, but it's also full of some big personalities. The team at Spire, Justin Marks at Trackhouse, I think they will be able to keep everything together. I'm putting a lot of confidence in them. I like the move. Trackhouse has a lot of talented drivers and not enough seats, but this deal with Spire could work out great for them in the short term and potentially the long term. I think I mentioned this already, but Justin Marks is planning on opening a third full-time Cup car in 2025. He'd like to bring Zane Smith in-house at that point. Would likely require a third charter. It's going to be tough to find one, but we'll have to wait and see.
We didn't want to get all that stuff put together and then go, okay, who's our driver? You know, and they're like, who's at the end of a contract? No, it's like, to me, it's the driver's always been the most important part of the entire puzzle. And at the end of the day, you have 147 people working in the shop, and it's one guy holding a steering wheel at the end of the race. And so that has to be the tip of the spear. And I wanted to make sure that we started this journey knowing who our driver is going to be.
I'm still processing this news from this past weekend. I can't even begin to think about next summer and what silliness may await us. But let me know down in the comment section below. Do you think Zane Smith is making the right move, leaving Ford for Chevrolet? In this case, Trackhouse/Spire. You know, Zane Smith in a Spire car next year. What can he really do? Spire says they'll have an alliance with Trackhouse. That Gamebridge money and partnership is certainly injecting important cash into that program, but how much can Spire actually improve? Can they be a competitive playoff contending organization next year? What do you think? Down in the comments below. Before we go today, I do need to bring up something very sad that I'm sure many of you saw yesterday. Yesterday, it was announced that Sherry Pollux passed away this past weekend at age 44 after a long battle with cancer. Many fans know her, of course, as she was longtime partners with Martin Truex Jr. up until, I believe, last year. But many more fans will recognize her for her charity work, her inspirational messages and journey. It was devastating to hear that news yesterday. All my prayers go out to her family, her friends. Cancer is the worst, but Sherry was able to be a positive force in the world before and long after her diagnosis. The world was a better place for having someone like Sherry Pollux in it. So I hate to end this episode on a down note, but it was very moving yesterday to see the many tributes on social media. Sherry Pollux made a huge difference, I think, in a lot of people's lives, and I'm glad that's being recognized, albeit under very sad conditions. But that is going to do it for this episode, y'all. I do appreciate you watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and as always, a big thank you to my very generous Patreon supporters. Without you, this show would not be what it is today. We'll have lots to talk about later this week, I'm sure. Thank you again so much for watching, y'all. I will see you in the next episode.